background because it's more homey and it's more, you know.
Okay, with an effort to sort of keep this on time, we've got 40 some already in, and there more are coming in. So my name is Donald Moore, and I'm chairman of the Hong Kong Association of New York. As everybody knows, we've converted to Zoom conference calls, and you know, frankly, I think they're quite productive, and we'll see how things change after this crisis. We may be kind of doing more of this instead of reverting to the old ways. The goal, the job of the Hong Kong Association of New York, as well as all the other Hong Kong associations around the world and around the country and North America, is to support trade and investment in Hong Kong. And these types of events are to provide value and information to our corporate members and other people joining us on the call. Today, we're very lucky to have Professor Yossi Sheffi presenting to us and taking questions from us. I'll introduce a little bit more about him when it's his turn to speak, but he's a professor at MIT. He's long headed the Transportation Studies Department, or Center for Transportation and Logistics, I guess. And but prior to Yossi speaking, we're going to get a brief update from Joanne Chu, the director of the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office in New York. She can tell us from a government's perspective and sort of the update on coronavirus and perhaps other issues in Hong Kong. And then followed briefly by Anna Fan, director in New York also of the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, who runs, they run a lot of events and trade fairs and so on. She's going to give us an update on their events. So Joanne, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, good morning, everyone. I hope you are all staying well and safe. And thank you so much for having me this morning, especially a special thanks to Don and Fei Fei for arranging that and for inviting Professor to come and share with us the impact on the global supply chain after COVID. So as far as Hong Kong is concerned, as we can see, the academic situation has shown some signs of easing recently, especially in some Asian countries and some European countries. And in fact, we know that many economies are now working on their reopening strategies. Some have even taken initial steps to reopen some local businesses gradually. So in Hong Kong, whereas the situation is also similar, we are supporting our economic sectors, including the logistics sector, during COVID, and also preparing for the post-COVID. I would say the pandemic situation in Hong Kong is getting more stable compared to mid-March. No new cases in the past 23 days until 2 days ago. 2 new local transmission cases were reported. So what we are doing right now, we are doing contact tracing, and we are trying to trace the source of the infections and to see whether there's any possible hidden local transmission chain, because we have to avoid a community outbreak as far as we can. And in fact, we have already relaxed some restrictions on the social distancing or physical distancing in the past couple of weeks. For example, Hong Kong people have already returned to their workplace, and public venues like museums and library have partially reopened. School, which have closed since end January, will resume in phases starting from the end of this month. As to the logistics sector, actually we have been maintaining a connectivity and the flow of goods between Hong Kong and the rest of the world throughout the pandemic, because as you all know, the logistics sector is one of our economic pillars, which also plays an important part in maintaining Hong Kong's significant role in the global supply chain. So as you can see, even during the pandemic, the Hong Kong International Airport, the world's busiest air cargo airport, as well as 2 control points connecting Hong Kong with mainland China, namely the Hong Kong-Zhuhai Macau Bridge and the Shenzhen Bay, all remained open throughout the pandemic. And we are also putting in place measures to support the logistics sector during the crisis. Like from the public health protection perspective, we have enhanced the deep cleaning and sanitizations of the Hong Kong International Airport through an application of advanced technologies to protect passengers and airport staff. So what we are doing in the airport is that Hong Kong International Airport right now is the world's first airport to install what we call a full body disinfection channel facility to kill the virus and bacteria on human bodies and clothing. It only takes like 40 seconds. So people just pass through the channel and it takes 40 seconds to do the disinfection. That's the public health protection. And in terms of financial support, just like what other economies are doing, one-off subsidy was provided to air operator and as well as aviation support services and cargo facility operators, in addition to other economic stimulus measures like wage subsidies to employers. As we all know, the pandemic has reshaped people's way of life. So we think probably the pattern of the global supply chain. So in the longer term, we know that we need to enhance Hong Kong competitiveness as a trading and logistic hub in face of these unprecedented challenges. So in terms of infrastructural building, like what I've mentioned, the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge and the high-speed train connecting Hong Kong with mainland China have strengthened the connectivity between Hong Kong, the mainland, and the world. We are also building our third one-way, which is expected to come into operation by the end of 2024. So by that time, upon the full commissioning, we expect to increase the air cargo's handling capacity to around 9 million tons of air cargo annually. We are also expanding the express air cargo terminal to cope with the fast-growing demand for express and more parcel delivery arising from e-commerce. A premium logistics center is also to be developed to increase our capacity of warehousing and shipment distribution. And another strategy that we are now using to enhance our competitiveness is global diversifications and high value and high-end activities. That's why we have upgraded our airport facilities in handling high-value cargoes like perishables and pharmaceutical logistics. And that's the hardware. And in terms of software, of course, we have invested in R&D and encouraged the applications of technology by the industry to increase productivity in supply chain and also minimize the cost and errors. And the Hong Kong SAR government has also introduced the Hong Kong Authorized Economic Operator programs under the World Customs Organizations for all local enterprises. Accredited companies will enjoy exclusive custom clearance benefits like reduced or prioritized customs clearance to enhance their competitiveness in the global supply chain. And of course, we're also connecting buyers and suppliers around the world through different trade fairs and trade shows organized by the HKTDC. We know that as an external-oriented economy, the economic recovery of Hong Kong depends very much on the pace of the global economic recovery after COVID. And we believed through the collaborative efforts and experience sharing between Hong Kong and our partners in the world, we will be able to rise to the current challenges and come out stronger. So I will stop here and then I will pass on the floor back to Dawn again. We can, if you have more questions, then we can discuss during the Q&A section. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Joanne. That's a good update and relatively good news compared to a lot of other jurisdictions. So that's really great. Hannah, can you give us a brief update on the council's activity? Try to be brief because we have to keep enough time for Yossi to do his presentation.
Okay, thank you, Dawn, and thanks for organizing this webinar on supply chain. And I really look forward to Professor Sheffi's sharing. As for HKTDC, we are the official trade or promotion organization of Hong Kong. So I would like to use a few minutes to share some of our latest trade figures and also how HKTDC could help small and medium-sized companies worldwide to continue to do business. So I would like to share my screen first. So, okay. Can you see it?
Yep, it's up.
Okay, that's good. So because Hong Kong is a international business center and a transportation hub, so some of our latest trade figures is also indicative of how international trade has been impacted so fast since the outbreak of the pandemic. So what you see is our trade figures in January and March since 2020. As you can see, we all know trade volume has shrunk, and in fact, in the first 3 months, both import, re-export, and export of Hong Kong have already dropped by 10% compared to last year. And in a recent survey with Hong Kong exporters, more than 90% of them have said that like COVID-19 outbreak has adversely affected operation from areas, including product delivery, supply of labor, supply of materials, and of course, worst of all, is all the cancellation from overseas buyers. And as your logistics sector, being at the forefront of trade, it is also one of the hardest hit sector. Hong Kong International Airport, which has been the world's busiest air cargo terminal for 9 straight years, we used to have like more than 1,000 flights flying in and out to more than 200 destinations. It has also recorded the first decline. So you can see from the green curve, the sharp drop between January and April. But luckily, it seems that we are bottoming out. As you can see, the dotted line which record the future bookings in the next few months seems to be improving. But still, if you compare to previous years, that's still a big chunk of difference compared to last year. For the container terminal, it is also facing severe downward pressure based on indicators such as rapidly rising levels of blank sailing and also cancelled retail order. The decline, as you can see, January, we have seen the sharpest decline, which is almost 16%. But the decline has narrowed in February and March, but that's because our seaports have actually captured some of the volumes from cancelled air cargo and land shipment. So compared to other seaports overseas, we could consider ourselves quite lucky, at least in the short term, because many of the ports overseas have seen double-digit growth in the last few months. So for that, we have to thank Hong Kong's free port status and our excellent port network and infrastructure, which has allowed us to the capacity and flexibility to support shippers during this difficult time. But having said that, the medium to long term, it is still very challenging since the impact in US and Europe will also start to surface, added with the uncertainty from US-China trade and also the uncertainty from global trade and economic outlook. But of course, there's always some good news. And like what people say, we should not let a crisis wasted. Similar to the case in US, Hong Kong has also seen some winners emerging from COVID-19. For example, GoGo Van, which is already an unicorn in Hong Kong, offering similar service like Instacart in US. They have extended the service from delivery to helping customers to buy and deliver necessity and all sorts of products. HKTB Mall, which is an e-commerce marketplace like the Amazon in Hong Kong, its sales has doubled compared to last year. It has also expanded its service from selling groceries to everything from retail brands, jewelry, watches, and they are also recruiting extensively, including young graduates from Hong Kong. So this is very important when we see a lot of layoff from companies. For the healthcare sector, of course, there are many new heroes coming from this sector. One of the 2 examples, one company has developed a robot to do deep cleaning, what they call vaporized hydrogen peroxide, which is already in use in MTR, which is the subway in Hong Kong, to do deep cleaning and this investment in train compartments. Another company, they have developed location-based solution that is very helpful when we need to trace people under quarantine. As for TDC, we have been organizing more than 30 trade fairs annually before COVID-19, but of course, many trade fairs in the world has been called off or postponed. No exception. So it has actually affected a lot of our traders, exporters, manufacturers, and buyers, as well as the forwarders, which used to meet in trade fairs for finding new products and finding new suppliers. But even so, even though our physical trade fairs cannot be run at this moment, we are still helping suppliers to continue to do international trade through using our online service, hktdc.com sourcing, so they can continue to source product on the desktop, or if they can also download a marketplace app which is connected to the same huge database. One difference of major difference of our B2B platform compared to other e-commerce platform is that we are supported by our trade fairs. We have been running trade fairs for decades. So we have a lot of data, credentials about suppliers, whether they have exhibited in trade fairs before. And also we have third-party authentication from DNB check or SGS, which will check whether the company actually has factory in China. So for when you are doing sourcing online, so you can be sure that you are also you're really talking to a real person, and that person are representing the company, and they do have a factory in Asia, but they're not outsourcing to other companies that you don't know. So we know that well, now we can't travel overseas, so we have also developed an O2O package, online to offline package for exporters worldwide to promote its products on hktdc.com, as well as offline in our trade fairs. So even though you cannot travel right now, but our trade fairs in Hong Kong is reopening in July. So even we may not be able to travel all the way to Hong Kong, all you need is to send your product to Hong Kong, and we'll have our specialists in Hong Kong to display the product for you, and also collect inquiries from buyers for the suppliers. In fact, maybe I add one more point. In fact, in April, we just complete our first spring virtual fair. So it was quite successful. We have more than 1 million of online trade buyers visiting the website to source. In fact, US is one of our top 3 countries in terms of buyer traffic. So so while we cannot run trade fairs physically, we will continue to do this quarterly online trade fairs to help us, suppliers and buyers to connect. So last but not least, I would like to mention a very important supply chain event in Asia, which is the Asian Logistic, Maritime and Aviation Conference. It will be in Hong Kong. Coming November is the 10th edition. The most important thing is that it is not a virtual event. It's a physical event to be taking place in Convention Center in Hong Kong. It's not a virtual event because we must have confidence that we can all travel freely again by then. Even that may mean that we might need to arrive at the airport 4 hours in advance. So let's continue to hope that we can start traveling very quickly. This conference is a very premier event in Asia. In terms of for the setup. Last year, we have more than 70 renowned speakers speaking, and other than the conference, we also have the exhibition area, and we provide business matching service for exhibitors. So if you are companies with technologies to help supply chain management, such as AI, robotics, smart logistics, we welcome you to join our fair. So you can see these are some of our sponsors, partner, exhibitors, and our visitor of the last edition. So the Hong Kong government, as part of the post-relief measures to help companies worldwide to promote their products using Hong Kong as a platform, we are offering 50% subsidy to the participation fee up to Hong Kong 10,000. So if you can join our trade fairs, the fee will be deducted automatically. So let's hope that we can all travel again very quickly. So that's all I want to share. I am happy to take any questions after our Professor Sheffi's presentation. And I'll pass the mic back to Don.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anna. Thanks for that update. Okay, let's quickly jump over to Yossi. We're running a little bit behind time, but we've got a little extra room at the end, so we'll be fine. And I'll quickly restate that Yossi is an old friend of mine from a long time ago. He's not only a professor at MIT, and he's a director of Center for Transportation and Logistics, but he's also an author many times over, commentator on Bloomberg, and an entrepreneur, has been involved and started up many businesses in this sector. So Yossi, I'll hand it to you, and then you can choose how long you want to do it, 15, 20, 25 minutes, it's up to you, and we can take Q&A afterwards.
Okay, Don and everybody, good morning, at least from Boston. You see my home office right now, decided not to use some artificial background, but you see exactly where I work now day to day. Anyway, so let me share the screen and see, oh God, what happened here? Huh. Do you see?
I see the screen.
You see the screen? Okay.
Yeah, it says COVID-19 business and supply chain impacts.
Okay. Do you see the full screen or the one that presenter used? Do you see one screen or two?
Yeah, full screen.
I see the videos. I mean, the presenters on the side and the full screen in the middle.
Okay. So let me just fix it.
A very worried looking guy.
Okay. So now you see one picture, right?
No, now I see the presenter mode.
Oh.
You were, yeah.
Okay, guys, let's just go no matter what. So I'll talk about very quickly about business and supply chain impact, focusing on going forward, what we may expect going forward. So, you know, there's been lots of supply chain risks. There have been all kind of natural disaster. There have been accidents. There have been government, of course, and politics is getting involved now in everything. But even before, we have all the tariff wars. We have cases of non-compliance, whether it's environmental, social, whatever. We have cases of unexpected competition coming and taking companies down. Of course, the economy, now we are also worried, just like 2008 and 1930s before that the economy will be going down. We're clearly heading into a worldwide recession. There's an issue with social discontent. A lot of companies are being attacked for not fulfilling what people think are their obligation for global warming, for example. And there is still intentional disruption, being it terrorism or any others. And now we're looking at a pandemic. So we had a lot of disruptions before. Now, the important thing is what I call the Anna Karenina principle. You know, Tolstoy wrote that happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And we see that there are many types of disruption. Each comes with its own particulars. No two are really the same. But turns out that the management of every risk involves some of the same thing: prevention, detection, response, regardless of what exactly the risk is. So there's some generic preparation step and generic response step. I'll go quickly over some of them. So first of all is setting up companies when something happened, set emergency management center or emergency operations center, trying to get all the information into one place. Now these places are running, many corporations are running it, but of course they're all running virtual. But the important thing is that the set of decisions is made by one group of people who have all the relevant information. The second thing that they have to worry about is communication, whether it's a CEO, a governor, a president. How do you communicate the situation? We see some examples of, how should I say, less than stellar communications by some leaders, being it political leaders or corporate leaders. And of course, some of the important things is just to tell the truth, to tell him, this is what I know, this is what I don't know, this is what I'm doing about it. And of course, some people are better than others. The important thing is that the Emergency Operations Center will have decision-making authority and protocol. Who makes the decision? Because some people may be sick, some things may happen when the CEO is asleep in the middle of night, whatever. We need to have a clear protocol of who makes decision under what situation. Very important to review suppliers to make sure that the supplier are still viable, to have an early warning when they are not. What's important during a period like this is to watch for fake and subpar suppliers. This happens in every supply disruption. There's, here come out a lot of fake product and subpar product because people are desperate for product, just like we see here with N95 masks and others that are coming to the US and Europe and had to be thrown away because they were not as good as advertised. Then there's the issue of sometimes you are a supplier who doesn't have enough for all your customers. So now comes the difficult question of how you decide which customer gets what, which product gets built, which product does not get built. And there are several ways of doing this. One way to do it is look at the most profitable customer, the most profitable product. It's not always the best way. Some companies have tried auctioning off product, which economists are saying is the most economically efficient way to do it, but customer perceive it as profiteering. So it may not work that well. Other companies decide that to do a fair allocation and give the same percentage to every customer, but of course, customer realize immediately and start doubling and tripling their orders. So some companies are just looking at history and allocating based on history. Anyway, it's important, regardless of what one does, to make sure that you explain and you are open about what you're doing, because this can create a lot of problems down the line later. Finance, of course, everybody is managing for cash now, as happened in 2008, it has been in 1999, managing for cash flow rather than for profit. But as you do it, as you, for example, lengthen the term of payment to your suppliers, you have to realize that you put small suppliers at risk. And you have to think about it, whether it's worth doing it. And many companies made sure that they help small suppliers that they depend on, either by extending their own credit to the suppliers, or guaranteeing, in fact, their credit, or some people in 2008 even invested, but took equity in their suppliers. And then the last thing that I just want to mention people are doing before we talk about what's coming is planning for recovery. You have to make sure that you don't lose key personnel, for example, that you start to work under the situation, under physical distancing and masks and PPEs and testing people at the workplace. And you have to make sure that you have very robust sensing of where your suppliers are, what's happening with government, what's happening around the world. And we'll come back to some of these points. So I actually wanted to focus on not on what's happening now, but kind of the next 12 to 18 months. I would say possibly beyond, because the question is, when are we going to have a vaccine? Not have a vaccine that is in the lab, but when we'll be able to supply several billion doses of vaccine. And most likely from all the medical advice that we are getting, it looks like the vaccine is not going to be one and done. It's going to be at least annual, just like the flu vaccines, because the strains are different and the virus keeps mutating. But anyway, so let's think what will happen in the next few months. So as we opening the economies, it's not clear who is right. We have cases on, and clearly it's a choice between multiple bad options, because as we open the economies, we get more chances of a second wave. So nobody's completely opening or completely closing, because we're trying, every government is trying to get some balance between opening and closing. And we see this playing in Europe and the United States, where in Europe it's countries, some of them are opening, some closing, and on the other hand, in the US, some states are opening, some states are more closed. The state that I'm in, Massachusetts, is still totally closed. On next week, the government announced that maybe we'll try to very slowly open over several months, over the entire summer. And the question is, will the subsequent wave be worse? There's a lot of historical precedents to say that the next wave can be worse. This happened during the 1918 pandemic. The second wave was much worse than the first one. And the question is, how do we make sure that hospitals are not overwhelmed? So we have, people are talking about flattening the curve. flattening the curve actually delays a lot of the infection and the death, like happened in Massachusetts. Massachusetts started closing, and in fact, it did not reduce the number; it just spread the number over a longer period. But it helped because the hospitals were not overwhelmed, so the hospital could still treat people. And in fact, in some sense, we are witnessing, for those scientists among us, we are witnessing a natural experiment around the world. You know, Sweden, for example, never really closed. They have the highest rate of death in all of Europe, some of the highest in the world. On the other hand, their economy had not suffered. So who is right? Next door countries like Denmark and Norway were very stringent in closing the economies, and in fact, they have very few deaths. So who was right? It's not clear yet, because it's not clear if now that Denmark and Norway are opening, will they have now a new wave that Sweden already saw. So it's very hard to see. We'll know more in the next few months. Now, the shape of the recovery. We have lots of people that on all kind of TV program, on Bloomberg, CNBC, BBC. What's the shape of the recovery? So originally we had people say it's going to be a V recovery, which means we go down and we go up sharply immediately. At this point, not too many people believe it. So some people will think it will be a U recovery. We are going down, we'll stay down for a while, but in the fall we'll go back up. Others saying no, it will be an L recovery, which means we're going down and we stay down for a while. Others are saying it will be a W recovery because it's going up and down, up and down. I think the right way to look at it, if you know the game Whack-A-Mole, that's how we should look at it. There'll be random flare-ups of shutdown and reopening around the world, and at random time in random regions. And this is really a challenge for supply chain management, because it's very hard to rely on specific suppliers, specific plans, specific market, because when you shut down, the market dies, not only supply dies. So how we are dealing with all of this? There are companies, just talking to Johnson & Johnson, for example, has what they call tiger teams, each one responsible for a region in the world. So not even a country, but parts of a country. So there's a place there's a tiger team that looks at northern Italy. And what they do is not only listen to what the government, but they listen to social media, they visit hospitals. They actually visit plants to see if they do social distancing well, and they follow all the instruction to make sure that there's no pandemics suddenly coming up in one of their plant or one of their supplier plants, trying to pay attention. And then they collect this information and transmit it daily to their emergency management center, which is in this case in New Jersey, but it's basically virtual. So what will happen is, the main thing that will happen, we already saw some of this in the presentation, in the Hong Kong presentation, the first presentation, when you talk about what the Hong Kong ports are doing, and we can compare it to 9/11. What happened after 9/11? After 9/11, we started creating safe zones in airports. If you go to some countries in Colombia or others that have lots of other terrorism, you cannot get into a shopping mall, you cannot get into many stores, you have to go to a magnetometer, sometimes to large restaurants. So you create safe zones when people feel that they can come into this. And this, of course, made sure that people started flying again, because they felt safe going into an airport, going into a hospital, going into an airplane. This will have started. So this changed the way that airports are run, for example. But not only airports, other, in the US, for example, you cannot go to a large football game. I mean, you are being, you go through a magnetometer and people look at your belongings. So every large gathering people needed to make it safe. Post-COVID-19, that's exactly what will happen. But instead of safe from terrorism, it will be safe from pandemic. We're creating minimal infection danger, whether we do, going through some spray to get everything out, whether we had the app that can be red, green, yellow. Some countries have a different app that simply shows on your app where everybody who has COVID-19 is located, without naming name, but just their location, so you can avoid going to these places. And in fact, the restaurants and the movie theater and events that will be successful in doing this will have a competitive advantage, because that's what people will be looking at. We'll be looking at safe zones. And unlike in the airports, it was government mandated. Here, it's not clear that it will be government mandated, and it may be a competitive advantage. Maybe some places will say, we'll get all the young people who don't care, and we'll put them together in a bar and let them do whatever they want. And some places will say, no, we are social distancing, and you come, and it's, I know restaurants, some restaurants are putting like a shower curtain, transparent shower curtains between tables, so people can sit there and not interact with others. Some people I know some institutions are putting plexiglass dividers. So in fact, this will be a competitive advantage if people will feel that it's safe to go there. One of the problems that we had throughout is the media. As we know, in the media, fear sells. And they say in the media, if it bleeds, it leads. It's very important to scare people, because then you get them to click on your news or to go to your broadcast. So we had lots of headline about the failure of supply chain, the end of just-in-time, the end of reliance on China. Everybody's going to reshore. A lot of it is not going to happen. So we start with failure of supply chain. In the US, started by pictures like this. Empty shelves and headlines, food shortages, meat shortages, egg shortages, toilet paper shortages, scaring people. Yeah. The problem is, if you went to the same supermarket and you took the picture in the morning rather than this is an evening picture. If you took the picture in the morning, it will look like this. Because all these journalists didn't realize that the way supermarket work is they replenish overnight. They don't mix the people who work on the shelf with the customers. But it makes good copy, and it makes so actually the media exasperated the panic buying and the hoarding. It's easing up now in the US, but the media absolutely is part of it. Also, the end of just-in-time. It's not going to end just in time. The Toyota production system is just too good, and it's not what the media is focusing on is the fact that just-in-time reduces the amount of inventory. First of all, it doesn't eliminate inventory. It clearly reduces the amount of inventory. But you can run just-in-time with inventory, because just-in-time also does a lot of other things. Just-in-time creates better quality, less waste, quick response throughout the chain to all kind of demand changes. So, and mainly, of course, the high quality and good customer service. So what you can do, you can keep, and I answer a question, I can talk more about it, but you can keep large inventory as long as you are not allowed to use it for day-to-day changes. So for example, the way the US had the strategic petroleum reserve when we didn't have oil before all the fracking, the oil company could not use it. Only the president could release the strategic oil reserve. You can keep, for example, the US could keep a whole stash of strategic reserves of PPEs, for example, or N95 masks, and not use it for day-to-day, but just allow, make sure that it turns, so hospitals can be ordered for it, and then it's immediately replenished. but still you can run just in time because you are not allowed to use it day to day. Anyway, continuing the end of reliance on China, not that quick. While we see already some companies moving out of China because of the tariffs, it is not going to happen en masse. And people are hoping for reshoring, don't understand supply chain, because you don't only move the final assembly. In order to end the reliance on China, you have to move the whole ecosystem of suppliers and sub-suppliers and their suppliers. That's a 10-year effort and a lot of money. And by the way, a lot of people moved to China originally because of low cost. But there are many Chinese companies now who are sophisticated, who provide sophisticated product for the automotive industry, for the high-tech industry, even for avionics. And they have their own set of suppliers all in China. It's very hard to move entire supply chain. You can move final assembly and make sure it's made in the US, but this is nonsense. It doesn't matter because you need to move the entire ecosystem. Last comment that I want to make is about sustainability, because we have a problem. The problem with global warming in this environment, if you look at customer behavior in the next few months, clearly less travel, less transit use. People are not willing to go on train and buses. They want to use their own cars, which means that as we open the economy, congestion and what happens to the air is going to be just worse. We'll have more e-commerce for sure, with all the packaging that comes with it and all the trips that go with it. And the fact that sustainability may become luxury good. We have in the US 32 million people that lost, that's approximately 1 in 5 US workers lost their employment. Well, money is going to be an issue. Money is going to be a problem. And we saw in 2008 that Walmart did very well because they sell inexpensive stuff. It's not clear that people will be willing to pay more for something that is sustainable, because most of these things cost a little more. Because you have to, people who know, making sustainable food, for example, it costs a lot more. General trends are low oil price also is not going to help sustainability, because it's going to make renewables less competitive with oil. Just want to say, historically, after the financial crash in 2008-9, emission went back to all-time high. And companies, when I talk to companies now, they used to say that the corporate social responsibility is one of their main objectives. Nobody in straight face is talking like this. And it's good to get some of these executives, when they're not talking to the public. Because when not talking to public, they tell you that right now, they're still worried just before about cost, about finances and customer service. And the one thing that will come to the top is risk management, not sustainability. And sustainability is not even number 3 or 4 in their objectives, in their priorities. Anyway, so let me stop here. And as Don mentioned, I wrote 2 books, and there's a lot more stuff on my website. I put the website down under my book, so if you can buy the books on Amazon. But you can find a lot more stuff, a lot more information regarding to COVID-19 and supply chain on my website. So let me stop here and stop the sharing and turn it back to Don.
Yossi, thank you so much for that. We'll be monitoring the Q&A, but I had a couple. Are we getting feedback? Is that all right? Okay. I'm just sort of guessing that maybe your books on the power of resilience might be more popular these days than the sustainability ones. I like the byline of the power of resilience, how the best companies manage the unexpected. And this has got to be one of the biggest unexpecteds is a true black swan, isn't it?
It's absolutely a true black swan. It's really interesting because I've been consulting to many, many companies and talking to boards. My basic message was that risk and resilience is basically a board function. The board has to make sure that the top executives are worrying about it and not just talking about it, because it's not tied to the quarterly performance, and executive bonuses are tied by and large to quarterly performance on the annual performance. This is not, this is a cost thing. And companies and boards have to make sure that the companies are paying attention to this and putting processes in place. Even very good companies like Intel, for example, which is really a gold standard in terms of risk management and resilience, or Cisco. Cisco has a playbook, what they call 18 playbooks, that for all type of disruptions. They even have one for pandemic, but the one for pandemic was in China. So it's yes, it started in China, but nobody foresaw a pandemic that will bring the entire world down and will close markets all over the world. So, and close market, and it's even beyond this. As we open, it will change capacity of plants and warehouses, because now you have people that have to be separated from each other. So you cannot have the same capacity as before, even when you run a warehouse. So you see, by the way, because of this, there's people are investing in, especially in our field, in robotics in warehouses, because this helps. But by and large, in the short and medium terms, capacity of plants and warehouses will be down, because you cannot bring as many people and you cannot change the whole processes that quickly. And costs will be up, because you want to keep going. So instead of one shift, you need to run 2 shifts. Instead of 2 shifts, you need to run 3 shifts. So costs will be higher. And we can expect this.
So I take it from much of your presentation that you don't really expect this massive deglobalization, this massive onshoring of production. There'll be, of course, bits of that and trends of that, and that's politically, the politics of that is another matter. But are there aspects of like U.S. government or other government actions that you think have been particularly good or particularly bad with respect to the supply chain?
Well,
without being subject to a Twitter feed rant, that is.
Yes, without such a subject to attacks from all over the place. Look, the U.S. started the whole China, trade war. The U.S. had actually valid concerns about China. There's clearly IP theft and forcing IP out, and clearly. But imagine instead of the U.S. president going out and bad-mouthing China and doing all the nonsense that we did, and bad-mouthing by everybody else, just imagine creating all the Europeans and Canada and South America, creating a whole bloc that can press China to do something different. But rather than look macho and make big statements and all these are, and what's happening now is like kids in a sandbox, between China and the US. It's so non-productive, all the war of words, and you don't know where it will end up. That's the problem. The problem for me is political, and let me make one political comment, not in the US, but in particular. The most likely outcome out of this is more populist governments, which we saw after 2008. It took a while, but it resulted in Brexit and Hungary and Donald Trump, and so we see a lot of this in Bolsonaro in Brazil. We see a lot of it around the world because people are looking for answers, and when the open democracies fail to give reasonable answers, they go for populism, and then you start having things that are not well thought out, like closing borders suddenly. I mean, come on, it's what are you doing? You know, Donald Trump just announced that the United States is closed indefinitely. What are you talking about? I mean, people live still in the days of World War II when the United States was totally self-sufficient. I mean, the United States is totally dependent on the rest of the world. And the rest of the world is dependent on the United States. Furthermore, the whole fight with China is ridiculous because China is still a huge market and growing market. The whole Asian market is growing. So disconnecting from the rest of the world is some of this. And it's not only him. It's a lot of Brexit is a classical example. Lots of leaders are going to go for the cheap shots, and that, to me, that's the biggest risk, and I don't know how to estimate it.
Yeah, well, and not, of course, wanting to get too much into politics, but I just split my time between New York and the Midwest. And the Midwest, huge support for these policies, huge support. And I don't think they're necessarily followers. I think the politicians are following the mentality that has developed in different parts of the world as well. So it's what's the cause and effect? But not to stay too much into politics. We have a question from Douglas Lee. He said, what should the U.S. government do to strategically protect and ensure supply chains for critical healthcare products and pharmaceuticals? Any thoughts on that? Because that's come up several times in different
Sure,
areas.
I can answer that. I actually wrote quite a bit about it. Specifically, what happened to the United States with N95 masks and similar masks. So similar PPE equipment and lots of other medical supply. By the way, there are about 150 important therapeutics which US depended on China, including some antibiotics and others. But China, and by the way, also depended on India. It makes no sense actually to bring all the manufacturing into the United States, because you need to bring the entire ecosystem, the entire supply chain, and it's just not realistic, at least not in the next 10 years. So what you could do is what I suggested before. Keep some inventory, keep a large, like the strategic petroleum reserve. We had it, by the way. The Clinton administration started it. The Bush administration built it up to an amount that would have solved the problem in the United States today. The Obama administration, with all the people who are worrying about Trump, is the Obama administration that did not replenish it and took it down. Of course, the Trump administration also fired all the scientists who knew what was going on. But we lost the strategic reserve during the Obama administration. So you have to replenish the strategic reserve first and foremost. Anyway, but so I see that Fei Yang wants to chime in.
So, like in any supply chain, we have more inventory. There's some costs involved with that, but that cost presumably has greater benefits over the long term when you have greater supplies like this.
But in case of medical supplies, it's a national issue, and regardless of where you keep it, the government will pay the inventory carrying cost, basically. I mean, buying it is not an issue because you turn them, but it's keeping it, inventory, and warehousing it costs money. So the government will pay for it.
So being respectful of the time, we've got a few more questions, and if anybody in the panel has a question, I'm going to ask one more from the chat group, and then we can go to the panel. From John Dew, says, Professor Sheffi, what is the impact of COVID-19 on the trade war? He also references the reshoring trend, which you've also addressed, but is there sort of a bigger impact, you think, on the resolution or the non-resolution of the trade war?
Oh gosh, one hopes that there'll be leaders around the world with more gravitas, with more, with thinking. Right now, no, it's becoming only worse, I think. And it's exactly because what you mentioned before happening in Michigan, in the Midwest. There's a lot of support to, we need to do something, we close the borders, we bring everything home, without thinking about what it takes, without knowing what people are talking about. So I don't think reshoring will happen on the margin. It's not, I wouldn't call it even reshoring. it's somewhat rebalancing. People will still have 70% from a Chinese supplier, but will try to take 30% from European or North American suppliers. By the way, for people who are thinking this way, just know that a lot of companies who are procuring only in the United States are balancing now and saying, okay, maybe we need 20, 30% in China. Because look at what's happening now. China is opening up. Hong Kong is opening up. Asia is opening up. It's the Europe and the United States that have a problem. So companies, all these multinationals are buying, are procuring, selling all over the world. So they want to be able to continue working. So it goes also the other way. Let's not forget it.
Joanne, any questions from you?
Oh, I'm good.
Yeah, great.
Thank you. Useful sharing from Professor.
Sure.
And maybe one more from the chat group says, so what about the European nations? It's from Victoria Delvisis. I hope I pronounced that right. How are they now looking at China's role in the supply chain? You have a European perspective?
Yeah, the Europeans are in a tough position, because if the United States will start, by the way, right now there are no signs of easing the trade war, besides talking about some agreement. The problem is, in the United States, Democrats and Republicans agree on exactly nothing. There's one thing that they all agree on. They all hate China. And they're all anti-China, which is stupid, but it is what it is. If you look at, of course, Donald Trump, and you look at the underhand of the left and the, Bernie Sanders, they don't agree on anything, but they all agree on China. So it's, even in 2018, in 2016, the last election, many of Bernie Sanders voters voted for Trump. Yeah. Because of this anti-globalization, anti-China. So I think it will continue regardless, because of the situation in the United States, and the Chinese have to respond. They also feel a lot stronger now for good reasons. So the European will get caught. The European, in some sense, will have to choose. The United States, for example, is putting sanctions on European countries that using Huawei. So that's a tough situation for the European, because they decide which market is more important. And the US is not shy about putting sanctions on specific companies, like they did this company who dealing with. Look at the situation with Iran. The United States decided to sanction Iran. And then German companies, other companies who tried to do business with Iran were shut down from the US market, and they immediately turned back, because how can they compare the Iranian market to the US market? So of course the US market is multiple times bigger. So they got caught. Now, with China is different. China is not Iran. China is a real power and a growing market. So the European will have a dilemma. I'm not sure they know how to solve it, but it's a dilemma.
Yeah, my impression always that the Europeans, maybe for structural and cultural, other reasons, they always take it more on the chin, on the downside, and are slower to come back on the upside.
Exactly. Well, part of it is because all the culture of consultations and covers one behind and not taking decisions quickly. Just the structure of the European Union. I mean, when they deal, think about it, when they deal with Brexit, for every position, 27 countries have to agree on a position. Can you imagine what 27 countries can agree on? I mean, it's amazing that it's working so far.
Yeah. Great. Well, we're over by 5 minutes, so Yossi, thanks for your extra time. Thanks for everybody on the panel and the participants. We had a good set of participants in the Q&A, and there's even a chat that's saying, great presentation. Thank you to everybody. So
I hope to visit you guys in Hong Kong.
Okay.
Open.
Thank you.
We all hope to be getting back to Hong Kong relatively soon.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think that's it. We'll wrap it up. Great appreciations to everybody, especially Yossi, and wish everybody stays safe and we'll
Thank you very much.
get through this.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.